And welcome back, friends, to Cajun Coding. This is St. Raz, and we are learning Python 3 via the tutorial provided on SoloLearn. And picking up from where we left off, we have the basic concepts here. I think I clicked on that. There we go. And we finished strings, the introduction to strings, and now the next section is going to be simple input and output. Usually programs take input and processes it to produce output. In Python, you can use the print function to produce output. This displays a textual representation of something to the screen. And of course, as we can see in this example here, it can perform arithmetic functions, print 1 plus 1, return 2. And it can also take text information, which we refer to as a string. You notice here it prints out hello, and on the next line it prints world because we have the backslash, the escape character, followed by an N, which stands for new line. So that affects how that string is displayed to the screen. And the question, what is the output of this code? And let me see, we've got print, and then they've got the parentheses. Actually, this should be print, and then within the parentheses, print with the double quotes. So it should print out this, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. It won't put out an error message. And then, of course, this thing is kind of in the way. Oops. That's input. Let's go back to the question. Oh, that's input. I'm sorry. I didn't go back far enough. Oh, that was output. That's okay. Well, it's kind of a quibble there. So we'll just continue on here. This is input. To get input from the user in Python, you can use the intuitively named input function. The function prompts the user for input and returns what they enter as a string with the contents automatically escaped. So input, enter something please. And so this will display enter something please colon, and then there will be a space, and then this area here would be what the user enters. Let me try this because there's a little ambiguity to me as to what it does. So if we run it, you need to put the input in first. Oh, I think this prompts a window. So that it is actually running here. So let me see, test input here, and then we'll submit, enter something please, and then it outputs what we put there. Okay, I'll go ahead and return to the lesson. Fill in the blank to prompt for user input. Okay, and string operations. Concatenation, as with integers and floats, strings in Python can be added using a process called concatenation, which can be done on any two strings when concatenating strings. It doesn't matter whether they've been created with single or double quotes. So we've got here, we've got the input spam plus spam plus eggs will give us spam eggs. Then print first string plus comma space plus second string. First string, second string. Fill in the missing string. It says hello. It says hello world. Now you need to be on the lookout for white space. So what we've got here, this string is actually hello and then one space there. But because that space is there, we don't need to include a space at the beginning here. So we can just put world. We do need to close the quotes there. Be sure to use the same kind of quotes at the opening and closing, but it does not have to be the same as the quotes used here. They have to match around one string, but each individual string can use a different form of the enclosure there. So and concatenation, even if your strings contain numbers, they're still added as strings rather than integers. Adding a string to a number produces an error, as even though they may look similar, they are two different entities. So here 2 plus 2 is 22. Well, 2 plus 2 is 4, not 22. But if we take the string 2 and concatenate, which means to print right next to, print to the right of another string that is 2, then we get the output, not the integer 22, but the string consisting of the numeral 2 followed immediately by another numeral 2. It is important to note the difference between strings containing numerals and actual numbers that represent an arithmetic quantity. So we've got the number 1, the integer 1 plus, well, this is the string of the numeral 2. And one of the problems that this causes, unsupported operand types for integer and string. This plus symbol is the same symbol that we use for two different operations. One of those operations is arithmetic addition, where we're combining two values that are represented by numbers, by integers. It's also the concatenation operator. Concatenation isn't addition. Concatenation is just placing strings next to each other in a display or in a document. Concatenation can only be done with strings. Addition can only be done with numbers. It's not necessarily integers. You can add, you can sum floats, for instance, but they have to be numbers. There's a difference between a number as an arithmetic concept, a quantity, and a string that happens to consist of the characters that we usually recognize as numbers. It's a very, very important concept. If all my yammering on there confused you or you're not sure about that, definitely rewind and listen to it again carefully, because that's an extremely important concept. The bugs will abound if you forget that. So in future lessons, only the final line of error messages will be displayed. This is the only one that gives details about the type of the error that has occurred. The first two lines of messages, they're a little bit more cryptic and not as relevant to the actual exercises we're doing, so they're just going to take those out, is what they're saying. This type error message would be more like the one that you could really use to debug your code or figure out why what you had answered was wrong. Which line of code produces an error? We've got 1 plus 2. Well, these are actually, it's a 1, the string word 1, and the string of the numeral 2, which means that this operator is a concatenator, not an arithmetic operator for addition. What we've got here, these are both strings too, being concatenated. Right here, no quotes anywhere, which means the 3 is the integer 3, 4 is an integer, and that means the plus symbol is the arithmetic sum operator, not the string concatenator. And the last one down here, this is a string, this is an integer. Well, is this intending to sum or concatenate? Well, it really can't do both. It can't do either. So this is going to produce an error from the interpreter. And string operations. Strings can also be multiplied by integers. This produces a repeated version of the original string. The order of the string and the integer doesn't matter, but the string usually comes first. Strings can't be multiplied by other strings. Strings also can't be multiplied by floats, even if the floats are whole numbers. So let me see, print spam, and then the star multiplication operator, spam times 3, it'll print out spam, spam, spam. And then we've got 4 times 2. You can't do 4 plus 2, the string 2, but you can do multiply. And what we'll have here is the string of the numeral 2 repeated 4 times. Now we've got a string times a string, and that generates an error, as they explained. Python is fun. Times 7.0, and it actually doesn't multiply by floats. The error here isn't that we can't print out Python is fun 7 times. The problem isn't the quantity here. The problem is the data type. And we've talked about strings and integers and floats. Even though floats and integers are both numbers, they're a different type of number in memory. They're handled by the interpreter in a different way. So even though 7.0 as a float and 7 just 7 as an integer, even though if you use those in computations they may come out with the exact same answer, they're still different data types, and Python does not like it when you use the float, you attempt to use the float data type as a multiplicator of the string. Multiplicator, multiplicand, let's see, sum difference, quotient, factor. It would be factor? Would it be factor? I don't know. Forgetting my mathematics terminology. Try to multiply a string by 0 and see what happens. What's going to happen? You want to try that out? Let's do it. Think about what's likely to happen. I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen. And if we run this, there we go, spam, 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 2222. This one is the one it doesn't like. Trace back. Did it quit it? Let's go ahead and just delete that part. I'm going to run this again. Oh, of course this one is, that's a, let's do 2. See how that one works. Should work fine. So spam, 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 2222. Python is fun. Python is fun. What happens if we do 0? My prediction is that it just won't put out anything. You know what? Let's not do it there. Just to see what it's going to do, let's do it right here. And we'll see that that disappears, I bet. Okay. If we delete this line, I bet they'll be right next to each other. Ah, what happened there? See, So that line we just erased, oh, it won't let me do the, won't let me change the code. Oh well. Before I did this iteration of it, it had a blank space, a blank line between these two. So even though it didn't have any output, the print on that line printed out no output, but when we went to the third line, it displayed on the third line in the output rather than the second as it is here. So no, we're not going to save that. And note, there are comments that you can see about the lesson and such. So I'm not sure how well these are moderated, you know, so I'm not sure what all you'll see there. But if you get stuck or you're confused by something, go ahead and check out the comments, and there might be some useful information there. What is the output of this code? Be print, and then within the parentheses we have the string 7, and we're going to multiply that by the integer 3. So there will be printing 7 to the screen, and it'll do that 3 times. So 7, 7, 7. And going on to type conversion. Now if you get, let me see, when we get to the first question, there's something I want to bring up. But type conversion, in Python it's impossible to complete certain operations due to the types involved. We just saw some of that. For instance, you can't add two strings containing the numbers 2 and 3 together to produce the integer 5, as the operation will be performed on strings, making the result 23, which of course is not 2 plus 3. The solution to this is type conversion. In that example, you would use the int function. So we have here the string 2, the string 3. This isn't plus, this is concatenation, which would be 2, 3. If that's what you need to do, that's fine. But what if you actually do want to add these two? They're strings, but what we can do here, we use the int function, int, and then within the parentheses we place the string inside double quotes. Here, int, and then this is the 3 string inside the parentheses inside the quotes. Now this is going to be converted to an integer, and this is going to be converted to an integer. So this plus sign is not the concatenation operator anymore, because it's operating on integers. So it's actually the sum operator, and the result of that would be that it would return the sum of the integers 2 and 3, which is 5. And there are other conversion functions as well. You can use int, float, and str for string. And let me see. How come I don't have a hint thing up here? I think there's a hint help thing up there usually, but I don't see it now. We've got the unlock. What do we do with unlock? You can use some of your experience points to unlock answers. Now this is pretty easy, so we're not going to have to do that. The output of this code, int 3 plus 4, the output of this code is actually going to be 34. And the reason for that, it's order of operations. What you see inside these parentheses, what we're doing is we've got this string 3, the string 4. This is the concatenation operator, not the addition operator. So we're going to have the string 34, which is right here. But that 34 string is inside the parentheses here, and we're using the integer function to change it from being the string 34 to being the integer 34. And just in case anyone's wondering, sometimes this is referred to as casting. I don't know if they use that terminology in Python. In Java, when you need to change a string consisting of numerals into an integer or a float or something, that is called casting. And it's kind of like the theater term, where you have a cast of characters. So basically what we're saying is that the string 34 is going to be playing the role of the integer 34 for this production. And that's exactly why they call it casting. I think I'm 99% sure that's why they call it casting. The other 1% says that maybe you're just throwing it into another data type, which is another meaning of the word cast, just means to throw. But I'm pretty sure it's more like the theater term than the chucking objects at things term. And type conversion, remove ads, upgrade to SoloLearn Pro, no thank you. But if you would like to do that, I certainly don't want to discourage anybody. I'm just not going to do it right now. Type conversion, another example of type conversion is turning user input, which is a string, to numbers, integers or floats, to allow for the performance of calculations. Let me see. And what we've got is float input, enter a number, plus float input, enter another number. Okay, so it asks you to enter a number, and you can put in a number, and enter another number, you put in a number, and then it puts out the sum of those two numbers. And what we're seeing here is we've got input, enter a number. We've seen that before, but we're going to enclose that statement starting with input here and put an open parentheses here, and we're going to close a parentheses here. Now the enter a number there, it has a closed parentheses, and then we're going to close this one over here. And then we're going to put all of that nested information, and we're going to pass that to the float function, which works just like the int function, except it results in a float rather than an integer. And then the computation is to add to that another float, and that float is going to be the result of the user input of another number, which asks enter another number. So, and passing non-integer or float values will cause an error. I thought there was a hint thing up here somewhere. I'm not sure. I thought I saw it before, but what is the output of this code? Float to 10 times int input enter a number. Okay, and what it's going to do is, it's going to print out 210, and it's going to print that a number of times equal to the number that we put in. Now it says here, it shows we're going to put in 2, so it'll be 210 210. We've got almost right here. Oh, actually, I think I accidentally got the right answer. See, we've got 210 210. Okay, right. So it'd be the string 210 times enter a number. Enter a number is going to be a string, but that is nested inside the integer function, int function. So it's going to be string 210 times 2, the integer, so it'd be 210 210, the string, but then that whole thing there is nested inside the float function, which is going to change the string 210 210 to the number 210 210, which, because it's a float, is going to have a 0.0 at the end. So this is actually going to be the correct answer. And the next one is going to be variables, and of course we're going to make a lot of usage of variables. You do that in any programming language, really. So it's important to learn exactly how variables are managed in whatever language it is that you're studying. So variables play a very important role in most programming languages, and Python is no exception. A variable allows you to store a value by assigning it to a name, which can be used to refer to the value later in the program. To assign a variable, use one equals sign. Unlike most lines of code we've looked at so far, it doesn't produce any output at the Python console. So x equals 7, and then print, and then inside parentheses x, it would just put out 7. Print x plus 3. X is 7, of course. 7 plus 3 is 10. Print x, 7. You can use variables to perform corresponding operations just as you did with the numbers and strings. As you can see, the variable stores its value throughout the program. In that second sentence, what that means is that print x plus 3, which is x is 7, so 7 plus 3 is 10. But then here it prints x is 7. So x is still going to be 7. Even if you add something to it for a particular output, that's not going to change the value of that variable. There are ways to change it, of course, but doing it for that is not going to do that. What's the output of this code? Spam equals eggs. Now we're not putting an integer in, we're instead using the variable spam, the variable name spam, but the information contained in that variable is going to be the string eggs rather than an integer or a float. Print spam times 3. Now, if this was in quotes, spam, 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 but this is not a string. This is a variable name. The variable itself contains a string, but the value of that is eggs, not spam. Spam's just the name, so eggs, 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 it is. And variables. Variables can be reassigned as many times as you want in order to change their value, and Python variables don't have specific types, so you can assign a string to a variable and later assign an integer to the same variable. So what I said earlier about spam being a string variable, apparently I might want to clarify that a little bit. Here it's saying that the variables don't have types. Okay, what I said wasn't exactly incorrect though, because when we stored eggs, the string eggs, in the variable spam, at that point spam held a value that was a string. Okay, so in a way that variable was a string, but we could change the type. So we could say instead we're going to store the integer 2 in spam, and it will no longer contain the string eggs. It will instead contain the integer 2. Well, in Python that's okay. So what we've got here is x equals 123.456. That's a float. Print x, it puts out that float. X equals, this is a string, and then we're going to print x plus and then exclamation point, and it puts out this is a string, and then also puts the exclamation point. Some programming languages will not allow you to do that. If you try to store one data type in a variable, and that variable's already been declared as or automatically set as a different data type, the compiler or the interpreter is going to be upset with you. But Python looks like it's a little more relaxed in that respect. It's not good practice. To avoid mistakes, avoid overriding the same variable with different data types. Not illegal, still not the same thing as a good idea. So there are logically and syntactically correct ways to do things that are still bad practice, especially if you're working with other people, and in programming you usually are going to be. So drag the correct answer to make the code work correctly. Let me see. Well, correctly means that this is going to be the answer. So what have we got? We've got x is 5, y equals, and then we don't have value there. So print x plus y. So we're going to want these to sum to 12. So 5 plus x is 12. So that would be 7. Is this a 7? This is equal 7? Yeah. But if we put it here, that's wrong. We don't need two equal signs. So we're going to do that. I'm not sure what they call this symbol. That might sound like a strange thing for me to say. In Java, this is the assignment operator. And when you read from right to left, we're going to put the value of 5, take the value of 5, the integer, and assign it to the variable that we've named x. Now, if we have two of these symbols, like so, that is called the equal to operator, and it's used when we're comparing two things. But we just use one, and we call that the assignment operator when we're changing or initializing the value of a variable. And I don't know if they call it the assignment operator in the language Python, but and variable names. Certain restrictions apply in regard to characters that may be used in Python variable names. The only characters allowed are letters, numbers, and underscores. And they cannot start with numbers. Not following the rules results in errors. Invalid syntax. We've got a variable name here starting with a numeral. That's not right. Spaces are not allowed. And this is a normal name using the underscores there. Python is case sensitive. Last name, capital L, and last name, all lowercase, two different variable names in Python. Needless to say, using both of those in the same program, not a good idea. That's just going to be confusing. But remember that it is case sensitive. Which of these is a valid variable name in Python? We have a variable name, all caps. We've got a couple of underscores there. A variable name, and then we've got some dashes to separate the words, and a variable name with spaces in there. I kind of hate this. It's all caps, awfully bold, intimidating looking. Really, you got to shout, but it's actually the answer there. We've got dashes. These are underscores, are at the very bottom there. These little dashes, that's not an underscore. Numbers, letters, underscores. Those are the only valid characters. The dashes are incorrect. Spaces, also incorrect. Variables, try and reference a variable you haven't assigned to reference a variable you haven't assigned to causes an error. It's kind of clumsy grammar there. You can use the del statement to remove a variable, which means the reference from the name to the value is deleted. Try and use the variable causes an error. Deleted variables can be reassigned to later as normal. And we've got foo. What happened to spam and eggs? Okay, so foo, we're going to assign a string, foo, and then it's kind of odd they didn't put print. They just type foo into the console, and that outputs a string. Bar, name error, name bar is not defined. We never set up a bar. So del foo. Okay, and then print foo again. Foo is not defined. Foo was defined. but when we del foo, we remove that reference, so foo has no assigned value now. So at this point, when we enter foo, it is not defined, and we get that error again. Let me see. In here, you can also take the value of a variable from user input. Okay, and that's just showing how we... I need to try something here. See, try yourself. Why are they printing here to output the thing, and then up here we just put foo? So I'm going to go into the code playground and look at that. Enter number. So we're running. We got pop-up window. We need to input 7. Submit. I think I have the answer to my question, because this is user input. So that's user input. It's not just using the console. So let me see something here. So foo, if we do 7, I don't know about this. What's going on here? The console's acting kind of weird. And we may be talking about command line consoles a bit more later. But I think, I don't save that. If I'm not mistaken, Python can be run from a console command line, and they haven't brought that up yet. I'm almost certain that they're going to bring that up a little bit later, and that's very important when you're using Linux or Unix operating systems. But command line, using an interactive version or interactive mode of a command line is consistent with some of the way these exercises are framed. So, but we may see about that. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, the variables foo and bar are called metasyntactic variables, meaning they are used as a placeholder names in example code to demonstrate something. What is the output of this code? Spam, the integer 2, eggs, integer 3, delete spam, eggs is 4, spam is 5, print spam times eggs. Well, at this point, by the time we get down here, spam and eggs is 4 and 5. 4 times 5 is 20, so it would be 20. And that 20 is going to be an integer, because we're multiplying an integer by an integer. Look at that, they've got the hint thing back. I don't know what the deal is with that. It's there sometimes and not there at other times. And continuing on. And big ol' adds, okay. Okay, in-place operators. We're going to go ahead and finish this up on the next video. I think we're coming up on about 40 minutes here, so we're just going to go on from there. Before I leave, let me check to see, do we have a Linux lesson in here? Wonder if I can search for that. Linux isn't actually a programming language, but let me see. Packaging for users. Oh, look at this. Now, I think that I don't think this is a professionally designed course. It doesn't really come from SoloLearn, but it is a member of the community. But it looks like Mr. Sarkisian is producing a lot of stuff. So I don't think that this is going to be a full course like we have with SoloLearn, but there's some good information here. But I may do a Linux series of videos later, but not right now. But we're going to go ahead and wrap that up for now. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it. As always, share, like, subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, requests, I'd love to hear those as well. Thanks. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.